I'd like to introduce Kelly Jensen, an editor at Book Riot, which is the largest independent book website in North America. She covers all things young adult literature and has written about censorship for nearly 10 years. She is the author of three critically acclaimed and award-winning anthologies for young adults. And I am very excited to have her here with us today. Kelly, you may begin.
Awesome. Thank you so much to everybody who is joining, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you. A couple things on my end. I will not be able to cover, like, in mouth words, everything in the presentation, but you will have full access to the entire slide deck as well as the supplemental material within it that you can use however you want to. You're welcome to share any of this, and my contact information is in the slide deck as well. So if you do have questions later on and Caitlin can't answer them, you're welcome to reach out to me as well. So this is Empowered Against Book Bans, and we're going to look at the state of book challenges, what it looks like to build strong policies and responses, and then how to find and connect with allies in your community and beyond who can help you if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with a book challenge. So we'll look first at how we got here, some of the current trends in book challenges and the philosophies behind them, how to build strong reconsideration of materials challenges policies, and then connecting with allies, which I said before. I think I lost a slide here. There we go. A little bit about me. I'm an editor at Book Riot. I've been there for about 10 years now. I'm a former public librarian. I've worked in several libraries in Illinois and in Wisconsin. And I am an author and editor of books for young adults. And like I said, there's my contact information. You're welcome to use it. So there are two big points I'm going to say are among the most important things that I say in this whole presentation. And this is one of them. And that's that libraries are not neutral, but they're nonpartisan. And knowing the difference between those two things is really important, particularly now as we keep hearing about, how book challenges are a culture war and this, that, and the other thing. And they're not. That's not what this is about. Your goal as a library is not to be neutral. You take the stance that you provide information about everything that is appropriate for your community. You are a nonpartisan organization, though, in that you do not take sides, left, right, center, whatever. And knowing the distinction between those two things is pretty important. So first, how did we get here? How did we go from periodic book challenges that would make the news to there being so much book challenge news that the news simply can't keep up? So I'm going to start with this quote, and I'm not going to read it out loud to you, but this is from No Left Turn, who is one of the big nationwide quote-unquote grassroots groups who is behind a lot of the challenges. And they consider education, and that means both in the public schools and in public libraries, to be radicalized. And as you'll see as we move through the presentation, there are certain buzzwords that come up again and again and again, and groups like No Left Turn are really pushing these narratives about what's happening in public educational institutions. Like I said, you could read this to yourself. This is just from their Who We Are statement. So why books and why now? If you'll remember back to March 2020, when the pandemic began and schools started to close their physical facilities and move to an online learning platform, that's really where a lot of this started to grow. A lot of the open the schools rhetoric morphed into anti-masking rhetoric, which morphed into this anti-critical race theory rhetoric, which now has evolved into a discussion of parental rights. So it's a broader picture. After that 2020 election, we saw a lot of very far-right groups finding ways to give their voice and their money to censorship efforts, to these so-called parental rights efforts. And one of the big talking heads behind this is Christopher Rufo. And as you can see, in March 2021, he really started the critical race theory panic that escalated into seeing these waves of book bans happen again and again and again. And what's particularly interesting about this is Rufo doesn't hide what his agenda is. Like, he tweets these openly, and we see when he does that and when he lays out what his plans are and how he's going to achieve them, we see that happen. So, for example, back in July, he talked about his next wave of panic would be to really sow seeds of distrust in public schools and in education, and particularly tying it into gender and sexuality. And to do so, he basically tweeted, "I'm going to get all these hits on all these sites," and it started happening. We've since seen this moral panic around the sorts of things that are being taught in schools and the sorts of people who are working in schools. And it's really fascinating to see how it plays out. Terrifying, of course, but fascinating because, he comes up with what the talking points are going to be, and they get disseminated through all of these very well-connected, well-funded groups. So one of the other big groups pushing for censorship, and they call it parental rights, is the Moms for Liberty group. I'm going to talk about them more in depth shortly, but one of their big things right now is to fight the teachers' unions because they believe that the teachers' unions are the reason that parents have lost rights in public education. This is from a PR release I got 3 weeks ago or so, that they're like, this is going to be their next big push. They're pushing for their membership to get involved in school boards, and they've been doing that for a bit. This is kind of the next step. While they're busy doing the school boards, they're also going to try and break up teacher unions. So let's talk about the big groups that are behind sort of both the national level challenges that we're seeing as well as the more local level group challenges that we're seeing. So there's three kind of big groups right now. The first is Moms for Liberty. They got their start in January of 2021, and the numbers I have on here aren't, no, these are up to date. They claim that they have 100,000 members with 195 chapters across 37 states. They operate on the county level, so instead of being Moms for Liberty, they are Moms for Liberty / whatever county. New York, for example, there are several of them. I've got them listed in a later slide, but they operate on the local level and the county level so that they can do their work in a really focused manner. That said, they're founded in Florida, so a lot of what you see happen with Moms for Liberty in Florida ends up spreading across the country. I'm trying to remember what the big county is that they start in down there, but you'll often see a whole wave of books being challenged in Florida counties, and then those same books start to be challenged in other communities around the country. They have ties to the Heritage Foundation as well as big right-wing politicians like Ron DeSantis, and they are behind some of the rating systems you might see floating around, including Book Looks and Book Look, which are the same thing. And they're using these rating systems to get into the schools. So there's at least 2 or 3 schools that have kind of been duped into this rating system because it looks, by all means, by the school board who is trying to resolve these challenges for both those who are pro censorship and those who are against censorship by creating a way to kind of give parents more access to the books and what's in them. But these rating systems are created by any Joe off the street who wants to work on this rating system. So it's not put together by anybody with any sort of credentials to be rating these books. As I mentioned, they're working on infiltrating school boards. So there have been a number of Moms for Liberty candidates across the country, and they're very proud to be Mom for Liberty candidates, and expect to continue to see their name pop up over and over again. Another one of the big grassroots groups is No Left Turn in Education. They operate on state chapters instead of county level, but they're also very big. They're centralized in southeast Pennsylvania, so I think that they have quite a few working initiatives in the New York area, but don't 100% cite me on that. That said, it's on their website, so you can find it. They maintain a public book hit list, and in it highlight the books that they want pulled from schools. They also have on their website like the things that they're against going on in specific schools, and everything that they started began over a book called A Kid's Book About Racism. So they really jumped on that anti-critical race theory stuff early on, because they began in May 2020, but really found their steam in 2021. And then finally, one of the last like big nationwide groups is Parents Defending Education, and they are funded by very well connected individuals, parents, and politicians, and they keep what they call a map of indoctrination. So, this is a map of schools and libraries that have materials they don't like. What makes them a big tool for a lot of people is that they offer guides for how to file a FOIA report, how to show up to school board meetings, how to talk at school board meetings, and they're given the talking points. So people who want to get involved don't have to do any of the legwork themselves. So that's why you might hear a lot of the same talking points again and again and again. They're finding it through these groups and just repeating what they're being given. I'm not going to play this, but I do recommend clicking through when you get the chance and watching Tiffany Justice, who's on the left here, talking with Tamron Hull about the difference between a book ban and book restriction, because she claims that Moms for Liberty does not ban books, but they remove books. And Tamron Hall really pushes at her and asks what the difference is. And as you'll see, like, because she's so set in her talking points, she's unable to define the difference because there's not a difference. And I don't think I said this, but Tiffany Justice is one of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty. So this is like a great overview of their talking points and also like how easy it is to rattle them. So where did these groups come from? There are, in addition to those nationwide groups, and there's more than just those three I listed, but those are three of the big ones. There are at least 50 distinct groups operating elsewhere throughout the country. These can be local level groups that are focused on censorship related topics, or they could be groups that have just picked up censorship as like an extra thing that they do. For example, out here in Illinois, we have a group called Awake Illinois, and they do a lot of very right-wing political talking points. And one of the things that they were doing last summer was having their followers show up to public libraries and challenge It's Perfectly Normal. That was like their book that they were very interested in getting pulled. So this was not their core function, but it's an activity they took up. A lot of them operate under the mantle of parental rights, which can mean just about anything they want it to mean. 73%, so most of these groups, formed since 2021, and these groups have played a role in at least 50% of plans. 20% can be perfectly attributed to these groups, while 30% show evidence of these groups' influence. So, in other words, same talking points, same books, same resources that are being cited again and again. In New York, here are just some of the like local grassroots groups. Moms for Liberty, as you can see, are in a number of counties in the state, and I believe that they have cited Nassau as one of the most populated, one of the most popular Moms for Liberty groups in the country. In addition to the showing of Moms for Liberty in New York, there's also the Long Island Loud Majority. They were behind the Pride Display Challenge that took place in June this year. There's also Concerned, Baldwinsville Parents React. There's Speak Up for Education. And I've linked to some of these that have links if you want to look into them or learn a little bit more about them. Something worth noting is a lot of these groups are not good at like hiding what they do or trying to pretend that they're not doing what they're doing. So you can find all this if you want to. So one of the ways they've been so effective is that they use social media. And this is where I come back to like, they aren't hiding what they're doing. And if you want to know what they're doing, you can get into their Facebook groups, you can get into their social media and see what their plans are. A lot of them have their Facebook groups, and that's where they share a lot of their information. And I like to say information in quotes because all of the proof that they cite for why materials are dangerous or why they need to be pulled from school shelves, they come from such glorious sources as the Daily Signal, the Daily Wire, Fox News, Blaze Media, and just a whole host of other fake news sites, some which look pretty realistic, but are not. They're well-funded initiatives by politicians who have a vested interest in having their beliefs and their ideas pushed to a broad audience. A number of them also like to share videos. So there's videos they like to share that happen at school board meetings where a person gets up and performs pages from a book that are inappropriate, and they get to use that as proof of something on their Facebook group, and also to encourage other people to do the same thing. But then they also have these videos, both that are kind of creative for social media and ones that get played in churches and get played at like community events that continue to share this misinformation. And a lot of them look pretty compelling. If you don't have the skills to understand like why they're fake, or how poorly they source, like they look pretty compelling. I have a link to a few of them at the very, very end if you want to poke through and kind of see. But kind of knowing that that's where they're getting this information, that they're citing the same things over and over again, gives you an idea for if you find yourself in the position of dealing with a book challenge, being able to backtrack and see like, where did this come from, and like what information are they citing, and is this information even valid? One of the other things that they talk about, and the language that they use, is this idea that Marxism underpins everything in public education. They do not refer to public schools as public schools, but rather government schools. And the big overarching goal, whether stated or not, is that what they want to do is take tax money away from public institutions and be able to use it to fund private education. And that could be homeschool, and I say capital H homeschool, those big collective homeschools, or also like private religious education. If they can defund the schools this way, that's one way they'll do it. And it's a convenient, if they are able to create such a backlog of paperwork, such a backlog of administrative stuff on the school's end by putting these challenges out there, they're able to then turn around and say, well, you don't use our tax money effectively. So we're pulling your kids from the school, or the school shouldn't get that kind of tax money. On the right here is one of their images that they share that puts a lot of this blame on the CDC and this policy, or this ideal of what a school system should look like, to the CDC, called the whole school, whole community, whole child model. And basically all that means is a child should be able to have access to like anything they might need at the school. But they are twisting it to say that, you know, it's taking control of the parents. It's overstepping parental rights, and instead like indoctrinating children with certain ideas of gender and sexuality, as well as about race and social emotional learning, which they connect to a whole host of very interesting and also very bizarre things. So some of the keywords and ideologies to look out for include indoctrination, grooming, obscenity. And I like to point out that obscenity is one of the big buzzwords that they like to use when challenging a book. They'll say it's obscene, or that they're challenging it because it goes against obscenity laws. But obscene means that a work has to be taken as a whole, and not just the cherry-picked passages that they think are obscene. So we see this a lot with genderqueer in specific. I believe there's 7 pages that depict something sexual in genderqueer out of a 240-page book. That does not mean that it breaks any obscenity laws. But people who are not familiar with what obscenity laws mean can get in a panic thinking that that's, you know, like they're showing proof of it. It is convenient when they cite what obscenity laws are. They often leave out that taken as a whole part, which is the key part of what makes something obscene. Additional keywords you might hear include pornography, parental rights, that they do not co-parent with the government, which is fascinating because a number of them will call the police on books, or call the police on materials being taught or that are accessible, which, like, isn't that co-parenting with the police, co-parenting with the government? I don't know. Then also there's comprehensive sex education, there's critical race theory, and there's social emotional learning. Those are their big 3 targets. I'm not going to read these, but you have access to them. And these are just some of the graphics that they share among these groups that kind of instill this fear about what's happening in public education. So, for example, the one on the left talks about like what we see, you know, we see There's an absence of God from schools. Students are less prepared for success in college and life. No citation for any of this, of course. And then beneath that, all the things that they consider to be evil that are going on in schools that have absolutely no foundation in what's actually happening in public education. And then on the right, they talk about some of the key words that are used in schools and ways to respond to them. It's just a fascinating look at how skewed language can become and how skewed these perspectives can become. And when they share them through social media, and they look like fancy graphics, and some of them have citations. The one on the right has doctors who are attached to this. It can be compelling for somebody who doesn't spend the time to really research this. Again, not going to go into depth on this, but again, you can access it in the files. John Norcross is a person who connected with me about some political stuff happening in southern Wisconsin, and he shared these beautiful graphics to kind of pull together all of these pieces that seem like they're not connected. Like, what does reopen the schools have to do with not having sexually obscene books on the shelf? But they're all the same thing. And it took them, the people who are doing these things, a while to come up with a framework of parental rights. And you can see what that entails here. Followed by looking at how Moms for Liberty has started to create this outrage and has really fueled a lot of it. And then how these pieces all come together. They want to take back control, and books are not obviously like the goal. They don't want to get rid of books as their end goal. Books are just a convenient way to start doing the bigger picture things. So where are challenges happening? In New York, you're near the bottom of where the most common challenges are, but they're still happening in New York. Top states: Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Pennsylvania. This information is from Penn's report, which goes through the end of July, so it's pretty up to date. Bans occurred in 138 school districts in 32 states and impact up to 4 million students, which is an incredible number. And then prior to July 2022, I like to bring this up because I'm going to show what happened afterward. Most of the books being challenged were those featuring protagonists of color or books by authors of color. And then after that, it was LGBTQ characters and topics. On the right, you can see ALA's top 10 from the last year and where the overlaps are. Like, it's very clear these are books by or about people of color or queer people. So then afterward, July to now, it's actually shifted a little bit. And now it's LGBTQ themes, authors, and books that are topping the list in most banned, followed very closely after by books by or about people of color. So what's going on in New York? I'm giving a broad picture here. This is just stuff I have found. The big one that stands out to me, and I still don't have the full story on, is that the New York State librarian was pulled from her job after she shared that Genderqueer was a favorite banned book of hers. A very popular right-wing social media group got a hold of this tweet and complained, and she disappeared from her job for 2 weeks or so. She never responded to any emails. She never addressed it. She's back at her job, but it's very weird how somebody can just disappear from their job for literally doing their job. Other stories in New York, that there are 9 books under fire in Yorktown, and I have never found an update on this. Per Penn, the banned books are still under investigation. In Auburn, All Boys Aren't Blue was challenged but retained. In Wappinger School District, Genderqueer was banned. Dear Martin was banned in classrooms and libraries in Marlboro Central School District. And that one came because an administrator didn't like the book, not because it was challenged by somebody outside the school. And then Front Desk was challenged as a read aloud. And this was one of the early titles in this wave of censorship during the first part of the CRT panic. Some more examples: Genderqueer was removed from the general collection in Washingtonville, and it's now restricted access behind the librarian desk. Baldwinsville has had several titles under fire. They have a very active local censorship group there. And as of the last time I read about them, the big story was they had a number of like candidates from this group and from Moms for Liberty running for school board elections. I don't know what the update is since because I couldn't find anything. Additionally, genderqueer was removed but ultimately returned in another district, Del Mar, New York. There's been a controversy over queer books that were donated by the school board. And then this absolutely bizarre editorial that ran not too long ago in the Warwick newspaper about it was titled 50 Shades of Gray for 14-year-olds and talked about porn in the library. And if you read this, like, and I do recommend reading it, it's just buzzword city of everything that these groups are trying to do. Once you recognize the rhetoric and once you recognize the phrases that they like to use, you start to just see them repeat over and over and over again. I mean, this is copy paste censorship. This is not even like individual creative thought. It's not true, being truly surprised. It's a wave that continues to build and build and build, and they're being given the tools to build that wave bigger and bigger. There's some more stories out of New York. I talked a bit about the Smithtown Library Pride displays that were banned and then brought back very narrowly. And then over 30 queer books went missing from a public library as part of the Catholic Votes Hide the Pride campaign, where this organization told their members to go and check out every book in every public library Pride display and like bonus points if they didn't return them. As if the libraries wouldn't know that this is happening or isn't coordinated or like something fishy's going on. They laid it all out there so you knew from the start, like, this was coordinated, this was planned, and here's who's behind it. And then a little bit of a reality check. So like we hear all this stuff, we see all these stories, but the reality is most Americans do not agree with book bans. CBS News poll said 87% oppose. A Chicago poll, 88% oppose. North Star poll, which was done for the American Library Association, 72% oppose. And then every library just put together a research on it as well, and 75% opposed. So the vast majority of people are not pro book banning. Parental opt-outs for inappropriate books in Florida, which is both the epicenter of Moms for Liberty and the Don't Say Gay movement, and one of the states that has put in the most restrictions on books in school libraries, opt out of inappropriate books is extremely low. Most parents are letting their kids have access to all these books. So it's a lot of noise for very little actual implementation. And it's worth reiterating that a small, well-funded, but vocal minority is trying to speak on behalf of the majority here. So we've got like how we got to here. Here's how we could be proactive. Update your challenge policy. So ALA has a great sample policy, but ALA's policy is just a start. Theirs was crafted before all this happened, and I would not be surprised if they update what their sample policy looks like, because there's better understanding of what challenges look like now. And use this as where you start. If you don't have a policy, or use it where you build from. If you do have one, but it maybe needs to be updated. The purpose of having a challenge policy is it protects you as a professional, and it protects the rights of your patrons to access any information that they might want. It's a contract between the two of you. And challenge policies are especially important because they uphold the First Amendment rights of everybody. They give a formal avenue to address concerns in a very uniform way. One of the things ALA talked about in their work, and again, it might be updated. Like, I would not be surprised if they update their materials now that they're learning more. But they talk about informal complaints and how that's a valid way to start the challenge process. But informal complaints put everybody at risk. And a good example of this might be you have a 14-year-old, you wouldn't have a 14-year-old page. Let's say you have a 16-year-old page and they're shelving books, and somebody comes up to them and approaches them about material in the collection. You know, that page might not know what to do and consider that like their job to hide the book or misshelve it. And it's not because they're doing something bad, it's because they're being approached by an adult who's scary and they don't know what to do. And, you know, they're under the belief, like, if somebody challenges a book, like I should do something about it. having a formal avenue would give somebody like that a better chance to say, if you have a problem with that book, there's a form you can go fill out, and the form goes through this process. It levels the playing field for everybody. I won't read this, but basically what Penn found is that in schools where books were removed, most of them did not follow their own policy. So as great as it is to have a policy, you also need to follow your own policy. It, again, protects everybody in the process. So developing challenge policies, you want to be able to articulate the purpose of a library collection. And if you can, tie it into First Amendment topics. So these groups who are pushing for parental rights are using the language in the Constitution, using the language of the First Amendment, use it right back. Talk about liberty, justice, and freedom. Very easy to do in your development policies. Outline the exact steps of what a policy looks like on the form, give a timeline, who will be on the committee, and you don't have to name names, but you can say it's going to be somebody, a parent, it's going to be a teacher, it's going to be an administrator, what their roles are. Give contact points, like who the person putting the complaint in can contact if they've got questions, and then also what information will be used to make a decision. Make it as accessible as you can. I think that having this stuff, like, I don't want to say front and center on your website, but in a spot that would be very obvious for somebody using your website is a good thing. The more transparent you can be, the less that they think you have something to hide. You don't have anything to hide. Like, these policies are here for a reason, but the easier you make them to find, the fewer things that person can then, put in their defense as a complaint. Be explicit in your challenge requirements. Make sure that they read the book in full, that they understood the book, and that their points of contention are not just copy pasted. This is where I think you'll find that these challenge policies can really protect you. What these people can do is they can go to BookLooks or BookLook, whatever, download the book that has been rated 5 out of 5, which triggers an investigation from the Moms for Liberty team, and then they just use that as their challenge. That's plagiarism in any definition that I know. So ensure that they have done their own work on this one. They have to know why they're challenging a thing, and they have to be able to articulate it themselves using their own words. Additionally, maybe put a limit on how many challenges a patron can have in at a time, for staff reasons. Like, you don't have enough time for 50 challenges from one person, but you might have time for 5. And then once those have been through the entire process, like, the person can put in their next batch. And also consider a time frame for when a decision's made to when it can be revisited. So a good time frame could be something like 5 years. You'd have a whole new board by then, in theory. Additionally, it could be useful to put the cost of a challenge in your form. If money is such a big issue to a lot of these groups, and it is, being transparent about costs could be helpful too. You could use an estimate, how much for a copy of the book for each person on the committee, and then a guess at how much their time costs, and have that on the form. So I borrowed this from Martha Hickson, who's got a beautiful template you can look at. But in addition to all of what you see on the ALA's sample policy, you'll want to have the person who has a challenge to include some other information, like have them articulate the purpose of the material, the positive qualities that are in the material, and then what their concerns are with the material. Have them bring as many citations as they can for why they object to a book. And this will be super helpful for you in understanding where they're getting their information, as well as like the validity and the authority behind those citations. And you can use that to kind of put in your back pocket for if you experience another challenge. Are you getting a bunch of challenges on the same book? Do they all use the same talking points? Like, where's this stuff coming from? This can kind of build that mental library for you. So in addition to thinking about challenges, another thing to think about is when you participate in censorship yourself. Silent, quiet, self-censorship, whatever you want to call it. It's the idea of either removing an item from your library or not purchasing the item because you worry about complaints that might come from the community. So you may have been thinking about purchasing genderqueer, but because it's so challenged, you choose not to. That's censorship. If it's a book that would do well in your community, if it's a book that has shown to be of interest to your community, like withholding that or pulling it is censorship. It happens at all levels. It happens from the administration down. And again, it can happen from the bottom up. Just a bad week or a lack of a policy really allows this sort of censorship to thrive. Ways you can be proactive against this, both for yourself and for other librarians, is to document any incidents that you experience. So, an informal complaint, document it. Weird phone calls, documented. Also document rationale for why you've purchased material. So I keep using genderqueer as a good example because it's pretty easy. You have a community of readers of queer graphic novels. That's why you're purchasing the material, because it has circulated well in the past, and this is one of those titles that will also circulate well. And you can use comp materials and cite them as your reasoning. This can all be in a document you keep for yourself. Like, you don't have to share it with anybody, but then that way, if a complaint does come up, you have all of this at hand to explain your decision making. And again, quiet, silent self-censorship is still censorship and a violation of everybody's First Amendment rights in your community. So while a challenge is in progress, read or reread the material. Give yourself time to do it at work. It's part of your job and not something you should take home. I reiterate this again and again and again because one of the things that these groups talk about is taxpayer money and how it's used. This is taxpayer money being used the way that they want taxpayer money being used at the time. So, in addition to doing that, document what you can't do in your day when you've got to deal with this challenge. Maybe you can't teach that, 7th grade library class because you need to take that hour to read this book that they are challenging. Make this transparent. They want transparency, give it right back to them. Of course, draft a response to the complaint and thoughtfully address each of their complaints and do so with citations. Use your research, use your reviews, use your examples from the book. You don't want to outright dismiss any complaints and take them seriously, like it matters. Likewise, don't reinvent the wheel here, though. A lot of colleagues who've been through this process probably have beautiful documentation that they are more than happy to send you. This one that's linked here that you'll have access to is from a challenge in Washington State at a middle school for Jack of Hearts and Other Parts. And the librarian wrote this beautiful 25-page response to why the book should stay in the collection and highlighted the reviews that it got, and addressed each of the challenge points in it. And he has said, just use it, you put in the work. There's no reason that another librarian couldn't, mold it to fit a complaint that they might be dealing with. Likewise, be conscious of what you cite. A lot of these groups hate ALA, so citing book list might be a little suspicious to them, but you have so many other resources that you can use in addition to that one. Choose an approach whether you're going to pay attention to all the media or all of the discussion of this or not. You get to choose which feels best for you, especially when you're in it. It can be hard to decide, do I want to know everything or do I want to know nothing? You ultimately get to decide which feels best. So do choose what is going to help you be most confident in the process. Likewise, decide if you want to approach the media. ALA suggests not to, but in many cases we have seen that approaching the media has opened up a story and given support to somebody who may have otherwise not seen it. It can really put a lot of pressure on people who want to censor too. They don't want their names all in the news either. And so sometimes having that out there or talking to somebody in the media can at least give you that, I did something else. I brought a point up. I created that transparency that they're demanding. And then again, I suggest just keeping your library website updated with where the process is. In Eanes, Texas, earlier this year, there were something like 130 books challenged by a parent group down there. And a lot of this went unreported except for what was happening in their Facebook group. And what the district did is they decided to list all of the books that were challenged, when they were challenged, why they were challenged, and then what the status of the challenge was. And it's this beautiful template of just okay, here's where we are. This book was challenged. Oh, it's under review. a decision's going to be made on this day at this meeting. The same people who were demanding transparency from the school were outraged when they got that same transparency. But that's exactly what they want. So it's helpful to then have that to inform your whole community of what's going on and not just this one segment of your community. I won't read through these, but this is a good example of the cost put in when it comes to a challenge and how much it costs to do a challenge. They only included the cost of the books, but you can include anything you see appropriate. Copies of this are in the file you'll have access to. And then here's another, this is a very short response to the summary of what the committee decided, but another good example of who's on the committee, what the vote in the committee was, and who challenged it. Giving the rationale for the decision and deciding whether or not to name who did or didn't vote a certain way, that's up to you. Just be consistent throughout it. You can include your original challenge information, again, reminding the person who challenged it that you are taking it seriously, and consider including the costs. And then allies, tools, and resources. So let's look at some of the ways that you can stay informed, that you can stay up to date, and ways that you can really build a community that supports you in these challenging times. Know your local school board and your local library board, both where you live and where you work if they're different. These governing bodies work on policies related to public comment. So knowing what the public comment looks like and knowing what can be said and what the deadlines are could be really helpful for you if you want to speak, but also if you know of library advocates who might show up to a board meeting and want to say I really love what the library does, and that's all they have to say. Being able to give them that information can be super helpful. Vote in elections, and if you've got the capacity, run. School boards right now especially are going to be big midterm election vote getters. A lot of libraries split whether it's voted or appointed, but being aware of who's on it, and if you know of a vacancy and know of somebody who might be a great applicant for that position, encourage them to put in an application. And then consider hosting candidate forums and information sessions about the importance of local elections. Groups like Moms for Liberty are doing it. There's no reason that the public library can't step in and say, hey, we're going to host a candidate forum. Everybody gets to talk. Or even running a program about the importance of local elections, the importance of midterm elections. Those elections that don't get quite the same turnout are just as important as those big ones, and maybe even more important to you at the local level. And being able to educate people about why they're important is one of the roles that you can take. Of course, solicit patron feedback, and you all know who your power users are. Ask them to write to the board, especially if it's something simple. You've got a patron who always checks out books from the display, whether it's a Pride display, whether it's a display about Black History Month, whether it's a display about insects, whatever. Have them write to the board and just say, I love the displays your library puts together. That stuff goes into the board packet and lives there. The board gets to see the positive stuff that's happening, and it really can counter some of the negative stuff that they're hearing. You could also create on your webpage an area that says something like worried about censorship, and direct people to all kinds of resources that are out there about censorship to educate them. And then you could create a little form that sends a letter to the school board or the library board that just says, I support banned books. I support these kinds of books. Get people involved and engaged in a really low effort way. Of course, tap your power users if they're open to it, to writing to the local paper or to the city council about how their needs are being met at the library and how much they appreciate the people who work there and who build a community-based collection. And as always, power users are going to be awesome board representation if they can make it happen. Share your resources and expertise. Every challenge is different, but having a set of unified responses can be helpful. Tap community not community, but like tap your library colleagues who've been through it and see if they can help you in drafting responses. See if they have some kind of resource that could be helpful to you. You've got a challenge for Jack of Hearts and other parts. Well, there are plenty of libraries who have been through that challenge. See if they have some kind of document that you can use to kind of navigate like what your response might look like. I'm a big fan of documenting everything, even if it seems like it's nothing. Weird phone calls, books that seem to be missing or purposely misshelved, weird people coming in and trying to take pictures in the library. And by weird people coming in to take pictures in the library, I mean, there have been stories about that recently. And that's stuff that just document, even if you don't have like proof of it meaning anything. If you can trace some patterns, like that could be helpful if you do see a challenge come up. It can also be helpful if you are just starting to feel unsafe, being able to say, I documented this, and this, like what can be done to, make sure that we stay safe. And as always, regularly update your policies and procedures, especially as things evolve, especially as we learn more about the initiatives some of these groups are taking. These are living documents. They're not like one and done things. Continue to update them, continue to read them, continue to be aware of them and familiar with them. Some places you can turn if you find yourself dealing with a challenge or if you want more information about the current state of censorship and challenges, you've got every library in Penn America who are doing some of the best work. Additionally, your state and local library organizations are probably doing really great work too. I would say, especially in New York, you've got a really good like network of people who care about this and are passionate about this and like really working at it. Some states it's a little trickier just because there's so few people who can put in the time or effort. And they're inundated too with these challenges. Go to local and national media if that feels comfortable. And then a really great resource for you as well as for your patrons is Red Wine and Blue. And they are a group of suburban moms. I can't remember the number that they claim to have affiliated with them, but they run trainings all the time on how to be a book ban buster, how to show up to board meetings, how to show up and talk at board meetings, how to file FOIA reports. Like they are doing a lot of these trainings that other groups are doing, and their focus is on your typical suburban mom who has never been involved in politics before, but is deeply passionate about like their rights and the rights of other people. Very cool organization, especially for patrons who are like, what can I do? How do I learn this kind of stuff? Your local ACLU chapters can be good. I don't know what New York's are like. I'm going to assume theirs are pretty good. And by that, I mean, again, it's what resources they have available to them versus like how inundated they are with asks. There was a challenge at the Wake County Public Library. No, it wasn't even a challenge. Administration pulled genderqueer out of the public library. And so when it was called out, people within the system were trying to figure out what to do. And that's when the ACLU stepped in North Carolina and really helped support library workers and get the book back on shelves. There's the Freedom to Read Foundation and ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom. They're doing what they need to do, but they're also down to like one staff member at this point. So they're flooded. They've got good information, and I suspect they're going to update a lot of this information that feels a little dated as they have the capacity to do so. And then, of course, there's National Coalition Against Censorship. And a few more resources, like positive side of things. Ways librarians can counter lies from book banners is a piece by one of my colleagues who we talked with a librarian in the Chicago area who had a patron say, I don't know why you have a pride display in your children's area. No other public library has this. And so what did she do? She got on the phone and called every other public library in the area and found out that, in fact, he was not wrong, or he was wrong. All the libraries had some kind of pride display or had, the materials in a way that were more accessible, even if it wasn't like an outright display because they didn't have space or whatever. It's a really interesting look at like these claims that are being made and how you can counter them. Taslin Magnuson keeps a phenomenal book censorship database and updates it with titles that are being challenged, where they're being challenged, and what the outcome of those challenges have been. I've linked here to so many other resources. Franklin Strong just wrote a really, really great piece about, I think it was Conroe Independent School District in Texas, and how there's a group there that is based on a national group similar to Moms for Liberty, but it's not Moms for Liberty, and how they have infiltrated the school board. And by infiltrating the school board, had 35 books challenged in the system. It's a really worthwhile piece to kind of understand how of all of these pieces that seem so unconnected are really connected. And it's complex. It sounds complex, but he does a great job of like laying it all out there. And that's just in that system, but that is mirroring what's happening nationwide. And then again, other links you can get to in the Google Drive, you'll have access to our sample collection policy, challenge policy, and responses. And then some of these are things you don't want to know, but should. These are some of the films that these groups are passing around and sharing with each other, and the sorts of languages and ideologies that they're building and using as they fight for parental rights. And that's the end of my like formal presentation, but I am happy to take some questions. And you heard my alarm just to make sure that we can get time for questions. And indeed, we've got some time.
Yeah, we haven't had any questions yet, but I'm sure there will be some coming. Feel free to put them in the chat. We've had some commentary throughout your presentation. Just scrolling back up. Someone from the Auburn area commented that a mom for Liberty, who actually is not a mom, likes to use her 3 minutes of public speaking to ask questions, and the board members are not allowed to respond during public speaking, which she knows. So she asks questions to get video bites, but it looks like the board is unresponsive, even though that's not really what's happening.
You know, there's a great example, and it's in North Carolina, and the top of my head I cannot think of it. But they were having this situation where Moms for Liberty members were coming up using their 3 minutes and just like reading passages or, you know, using the same talking points over and over again. And finally, what they decided to do is, you know, and don't speak to me on the legality of it because it's probably different state to state, but what they ended up doing is saying that parents could not come in and read passages from the books or complain about the books until they filed a formal challenge. And then they can come and show up, but until they filed the formal challenge, like they couldn't go complain about the book. And it led to this great moment in one of the meetings where one of the moms gets up, has on her shirt, has on her hat. She's very excited to like come read her passage. And you hear the school board president go, "Did you file a complaint?" And she said, "No, but I'm going to take," "Did you file a complaint?" "No, but I'm going to take my," "Well, you know, you have to file a complaint." And like, it shuts her down. Like, she didn't take the actual effort to put the complaint in because she wanted to have that 3 minutes of being a hero on stage. And I really thought that the way that they did that, it made clear, like, you have an avenue to do this. Like, nobody's holding you back from doing it, but until you actually go through the steps that you have to go through, you don't get to waste everybody's time and you know, get that video clip that you can pass around.
I think that's a great point. It really illustrates how important it is to have a policy in place to deal with this stuff too. I mean, having a formal procedure really does help tamp down some of the outrage.
Yeah. And it makes clear you're giving people exactly what they want, which like you should, you know, and they should have the right to file complaints, but they have to do it the way that it's meant to be done.
Yes, exactly. Claire also wanted to mention that the Auburn High School librarian is actually the New York Library Association School Librarian of the Year. So
Nice.
that's a plus.
Yeah.
We had a great comment about school board meetings. And a few of us said, yes, you can, but the person said, can I go to school board meetings if I don't have kids? I always feel a little awkward going. I think it's important to go. Your taxes pay for public education. If you care about public education, then you should use your voice. And I assume you agree, Kelly.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. And, you know, even if you can't go in person, write a letter. Just say, you know, I'm a taxpayer and I'm really supporting what you do right now. And I've got a school out here that's like not where my tax money goes, but is, I don't know, 20 minutes down the road. And they've been dealing with so many challenges from Moms for Liberty. And like, I haven't been able to make their meetings because they're on a night I can't go. I'm not a taxpayer, and I thought, like, what can I do here? I wrote them a letter. I copied a letter to everybody on the board, and then all the teacher librarians, and I just said, I support you and the hard work you do, and I hope that you keep these books in the collection. And um, it was well received. Like, I think that we forget that sometimes these people just want to hear that they're doing a good job, and because they don't. So often they hear about what a bad job they're doing, and just hearing from people who support them and the work that they're doing can mean a lot. Even if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, like knowing that you have somebody in your corner helps you then through the next thing.
Definitely. Still no question, but an anecdote. Carolyn went to a school board meeting before she had kids and went again after having kids. And one of the school board members emphatically agreed with her points, saying that she's been involved since before she had to be. They
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yeah. And so many of these people who are showing up and complaining, they just started doing it. Like this is a new thing to them that, they're tailgating in some places. Like it's become such a way to build camaraderie and fight for their rights. And it's like, where have you been before? You've always had rights. You always have a right to say like, I'm not comfortable with my kid reading this assignment. Like, is there an alternate assignment? And educators come up with alternate assignments if they aren't already just like built into the curriculum. And so there's a lot of misleading information that, like had any of these people showed up to a board meeting before would know what they're sharing is just outright wrong, like not true.
Yeah, I think social media is really play a huge part in all of this.
Yeah.
It feels very powerful.
It does.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get your, 3 minutes sounding like a hero because you're reading like the most explicit part that is 2 sentences in a 500-page book, like, you get spread through a whole segment of social media and you're cheered as a hero, but like it's not that. Like that's not what this is about. And it shouldn't be about that.
I completely agree. We haven't had any questions. So
Yeah.
yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming today. And Kelly, I want to thank you so much for your great presentation. You had great resources and great tips. I loved your suggestions about having people have to fill out specific parts in their own words, what they're challenging in the form. I think that's a great idea. Um,
I just realized something. I must have missed a slide. I'd said that the first most important thing would be that libraries are not neutral, they're nonpartisan. The second most important thing, like I missed the slide here somehow, is that make sure you are protected yourself. Like you get to decide whether you have a public social media account or not. Like
mhm.
it's tricky, especially now. Like if you are public, like there are people looking to attack you any way they can. But in addition to that, it's really important to remember if you work in a public school or public library, any information that you communicate via email can be FOIA'd. And a lot of these groups are just abusing the FOIA system to get anything they can. And then they're sharing that as if it's some kind of news. And this is not just like they're looking for something negative. It could be that you're sharing something positive. I just got this grant to get all these queer books for the library. Great news, right? But they get that in a FOIA, they're going to twist it. And it's going to be this librarian is wasting taxpayer money to get these books about indoctrination in the library. And so it's just being mindful of whatever you put in writing. They might look for it and might try to find a way to use it. And the best analogy I've ever heard for this is if you wouldn't want it on a billboard, either as is or as it could be skewed, don't put it in an email. Like pick up a phone call, pick up the phone and call. That could still technically be FOIA'd, but it's going to be way more work than if you have it in an email. And I don't think that they're quite that sophisticated.
That's a good point. I didn't think about the foil thing. Cause we have, I don't know if foil is available in other states, but we have foil and FOIA in New York.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we have two different ways. We have the federal and we have the state way to do it. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
keep yourself safe, you know? Like,
yeah. I also want to mention that, you can also, if you're having a problem, you can always contact ESLN, the Empire State Libraries Network, which is New York based, New York Library Association as well, and your local ESLN council. So if you're in the Buffalo area, that would be Wingy Lark. I'm hoping that all of you know which council you belong to. We are here to help. We have resources and anything we can do to help, we are willing to do so. So
and you're doing, as a former librarian, I know it's not an easy job, and I know that it's not an easy job in schools either, school libraries or even as a teacher. Now it's even a 10 million times harder, when you're thinking about this and worried about like what could happen, and just know that you're doing the best you can, and you have support, and you have an incredible network of people who are like eager to support you. So thank you for being here.
yeah, thank you so much. Everyone, I'm going to stop the recording here, and